You're not supposed to see this. That's the truth you'll have to wrestle with, because what you're about to witness, what you're holding in your mind's eye, is the kind of secret they keep buried in the shadows of Mars' red dust and the cold silence of space. It's not science fiction. It's not a staged experiment or a sci-fi thriller meant for some late-night binge. No, this is raw, unfiltered. A glimpse behind the sealed glass of a helmet, behind the steel walls of the research station, behind the sterile lies that feed the headlines. If you think you understand what happens the moment someone removes their helmet on Mars, think again. This is what would really happen, but nobody ever dares to talk about it, because once you open this door, there's no closing it again. I'm not a narrator here. I'm not just telling you a story. I'm a witness. I was there, watching, trapped, in that endless red dust, a silent observer to something that shattered every certainty I had about human survival, about reality itself. It began as the kind of mission we all dreamed of. Pioneers stepping into the final frontier, breaking through, the last cosmic barrier to make Mars home. But what they never prepared for, what no training could simulate, was the slow, creeping unraveling of everything we believed about life beyond Earth. The first sign was subtle. An almost imperceptible shift in the air, a pause in the hum of machines, a whisper in the silence that didn't belong. Then came the moment that no one would ever forget. She stood there in the sterile airlock, helmet in hand, her face illuminated by the dim red glow filtering through the dust storm outside. Everyone held their breath. It was a gesture of defiance, a symbol of ultimate trust in the technology that kept her alive. And yet, in that suspended moment, before she lowered the helmet, the world held its breath too, as if waiting for something, forbidden to unfold. She whispered a name no one else had ever heard, just barely audible, yet it cut through the static of Mars's harsh silence. Her lips moved, the sound trembling with something ancient and raw, a word that did not belong to this world or time. And then she vanished. Gone, as if swallowed by the very air that should have killed her. No alarms, no struggle, no trace. Just a silence so profound it made the dust outside feel alive. If you think you can understand what that means, or what happens next, you're wrong. Because the truth is hidden in plain sight, woven through the data logs, locked away in the psychological fractures of the crew, and whispered in the desperate pleas of a baby who suddenly speaks a name long forgotten. This is the story no one was ever meant to hear. And now, you have. For the first few days on Mars, the station hummed with the steady rhythm of controlled breathing, mechanical precision, and the relentless ticking of scientific progress. The crew was tight-knit, bonded, by the shared dream of exploration and the silent prayers of families back home. But Mars isn't Earth. The atmosphere is a cruel mimic, a ghostly echo of life, and beneath its scarlet surface lies a psychological landscape far more dangerous than the barren rock. The walls of the station were thick, designed to hold back the hostile void, but not the creeping sense of isolation that settled into every mind. The days blurred into an endless twilight of routines, punctuated by the flicker of static in the comms, and the distant howl of the dust storms that clawed at the station like restless spirits. It was on the seventh sol that the first strange thing happened. A whisper over the comm channel, so faint it was almost dismissed as interference. But the words were clear. Elysium. No one said the word out loud before, not in the logs, not in the training, not even in the personal messages they sent back to Earth. Yet there it was, a single name, whispered as if it were a key unlocking, something deeply buried. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but the psychologist insisted it was stress, the mind playing tricks under the relentless pressure. But deep down, everyone felt the temperature drop. A cold realization that the real danger wasn't the thin air or the radiation. It was the silence itself, the things left unspoken. Then the baby spoke. Amelia was born on Mars, a tiny miracle wrapped in layers of protective fabric, her first cries a promise of hope. But one night in the dead quiet she uttered a name, A name no one had told her. A name no one could explain. Lazarus. The air grew heavier. The crew's once confident faces cracked under the weight of the unknown. Because that name, Lazarus, was a ghost from their collective past, a legend from Earth's darkest stories, a symbol of death and impossible returns. And the technology, the devices meant to protect and connect them, began to betray them. Static voices came through the radios, voices that sounded like long-dead relatives calling from the void, their words full of sorrow and warning. The line between memory and madness blurred. The vanished woman's last whisper echoed in every chamber of the station, a haunting refrain that no one dared repeat but all remembered. You don't understand. She disappeared into the thin Martian air like a phantom, leaving behind questions that gnawed at the edges of sanity. What happens when the helmet comes off on Mars? The answer is not what they told you. Not a violent death in seconds, but a disappearance, an unraveling of existence itself, like slipping through a tear in reality, caught between worlds. And now, with every breath you take as you read this, the question lingers in the air around you, unseen but undeniable. What if removing your helmet on Mars doesn't just kill you, but erases you? Because if that's true, then what else have we missed in the silence? What horrors wait beyond the veil of the red dust, in the places where science and superstition collide? You think you're alone in this. You think you're just watching a story unfold. But the truth is, this story has been watching you, and now it's waiting. The silence after her last words, "You don't understand," didn't just linger. It swallowed everything whole, folding time back on itself like a dark pulse. But here's the thing. What if none of it was real? What if the vanishing, the whispering baby, the voices on the static-laced radio were nothing but cracks in the fragile glass of a mind stretched beyond breaking? You feel that? That slow, insidious crawl of doubt seeping under your skin like a cold whisper telling you, maybe you're the one losing it. Because the deeper you dig into this story, the one no one dared to tell, the real unsolved mystery lurking beneath the dust and silence, the less you can trust your own memories. There are gaps, whole chunks of time missing, erased like bad code, glitches that don't belong, like a broken record stuck on a phrase you never heard before but can't stop repeating in your head. And then, in the quietest hours, when your mind is too raw to protect itself, the background hum twists into something darker, something almost sentient, a voice just beneath the threshold of hearing, saying things that twist the knife deeper, and that's when he appears. They called him Jonas, the second face in this fractured reality, the shadow that crept alongside the light. But you can't decide if Jonas is a friend or a ghost, a broken soul reaching out, or a shape your mind made to keep the loneliness at bay. His eyes don't quite meet yours. There's always that flicker, like he's wrestling with some secret, a private terror he won't, or can't, share. His voice is low, rough around the edges, filled with the kind of weariness that smells like regret, and too many late-night confessions nobody was ready to hear. Jonas keeps asking questions no one else dares to voice, dragging the crew, and maybe you, into a maze where nothing is what it seems. What they don't want you to remember, he mutters once like a broken mantra. But sometimes his words slip, revealing fractures in his own story, like the night he insisted he was the one who heard the name Elysium first, though all the logs say otherwise, or when he disappears for hours, only to reappear acting as if nothing happened. A blank space where memories should be. That's the cruelest twist. Maybe the vanishing wasn't a disappearance at all, but a fracturing of the mind, a slip-through, the edges of reality caused by something buried deep in the human psyche. And the voices on the comms? Maybe they're echoes of trauma, replaying long-buried fears that Mars didn't create but only revealed. Your own thoughts start to betray you. You find recordings you don't remember making, footage of moments you thought you lived but now doubt happened. There's a clip of the vanished woman, her face pale and distant, whispering the name Lazarus, but then the audio glitches, her words warping into a twisted laugh that doesn't belong to her. You rewind, watch it again. The more you stare, the less it makes sense. And all the while, the station's cold walls press in, the dust storms pounding like a heartbeat you can't escape. The real terror isn't death. It's the space between what you see and what you feel. The dark, raw edges of a truth that doesn't want to be found. Because maybe the only real unsolved mystery isn't what happens when the helmet comes off, on Mars. Maybe it's what happens when you try to remember. The moment you think you've cracked it, the hidden truth finally shimmering clear through the fog, you clutch it like a lifeline, desperate to believe the mystery will untangle itself. Like all those late nights you told yourself, this time, I'll finally understand. You find it in the data logs, buried beneath layers of corrupted files and sanitized reports, a thread of evidence that feels like a key. The vanished woman wasn't erased by the thin Martian air. No. She stepped into something else, something woven into the fabric of time and memory, a ripple that echoes not just on Mars, but through the shadows of human consciousness itself. You watch the playback, a flickering image, blurry but undeniable. A second woman nearly identical, whispering the same forbidden name, Elysium, decades ago. An event recorded, classified, but never erased from the minds of those who lived through it. The parallels hit you like a cold wave. This isn't the first time the story has played out. The old mission on Earth, the forgotten tragedy, the crew that vanished without a trace. A memory glitch in the official records, a haunting echo that feels too intimate, too real, like a wound you never knew you had, but now aches in the deepest part of your mind. You feel it in your bones. This isn't a random glitch. It's a pattern, a loop. A nightmare relived by a new cast of characters under a new sky, but the same dark undercurrent pulling them under. Your fingers tremble as you open the psychologist's private journal, the one Jonas warned you about. His handwriting is scrawled, frantic, fragmented, words that confess more than they reveal. They lied. You're not crazy. The silence is the weapon. The watching doesn't stop. We are the experiment, the test subjects in a game we don't remember signing up for. And then the pages bleed into a single phrase repeated like a mantra. Look behind your eyes. What you see is not what you know. It's then the air shifts again, subtle but undeniable. The station's humming takes on a sinister edge, and your reflection in the cracked glass stares back with eyes that no longer seem quite your own. The temperature drops, and from the corner of your vision, a shadow moves, too fluid, too purposeful, to be a trick of the light. You turn sharply, heart pounding, but the space is empty, silent except for a soft, almost imperceptible breathing, like someone, or something, has been there all along, watching, waiting, folding you deeper into a trap you can't see but feel tightening. You realize now this force, this invisible presence, isn't about Mars or helmets or vanished women. It's something more primal, an echo of trauma buried so deep in your psyche that it's become the architect of your reality, bending memory, reshaping fear into a living thing. The station, the voices, even Jonas, are they all manifestations? Or are you just the latest soul caught in an ancient pattern that preys on the mind's most vulnerable fissures? Then the single detail unravels everything. The timestamp on the recovered footage, the one that seemed to hold the key, is off by exactly 17 years. The image of the second woman isn't from a past mission. It's from the future. And if that's true, then everything you thought you knew, the timeline, the cause, even your own memories, collapses into a loop of endless uncertainty where past, present, and future bleed together into one impossible question. What if the story isn't unfolding before you but folding back on itself? You rewind the footage again and again, because now you realize the only thing certain is that you're not crazy. They lied to you. And this story was never meant to be watched once. You weren't alone. You never were. That truth crashes down in a tidal wave of cold certainty as you start to notice the signs, flickers in the corner of your vision, voices overlapping in whispered static on channels you swore were dead, and symbols etched faintly into the margins of every recording you thought you'd seen 100 times before. You find a message, not broadcast, but hidden, embedded deep in the data streams, a series of cryptic symbols, geometric and jagged, flashing for milliseconds. Only when you slow the footage to fractions of a second, a language you don't know but somehow recognize, as if it was always there waiting for you to unlock it. It's not just your story, it's theirs. The others, the lost, the watchers, people like you who've been silently tracking this, unraveling nightmare from the edges of the known world, connected by shadows and silence. And now, somehow, you're part of the signal. Shared dreams begin to plague your nights, fragmented and visceral. Dreams of a cold, endless hallway lined with flickering lights and peeling paint, voices just out of reach saying the same phrase over and over again. You were right all along. The phrase echoes in your waking thoughts, a mantra that twists reality tighter until you can't tell where the dream ends and the truth begins. Others write to you through digital backdoors, obscure forums, encrypted messages buried in the code of what the government never released, fragments of found footage from 20 years ago that eerily mirror your own fractured experience. They speak of experiments, of minds pried open and memories rewritten, of a force watching from somewhere beyond comprehension, shaping and erasing reality like a puppeteer in a room without walls. In the midst of this creeping dread, a new voice surfaces, an observer who may be the only one telling the truth. Not a friend, not a foe, but a witness to everything, speaking through layers of interference and distortion. Their messages are raw and unpolished, like recordings smuggled out of some hidden bunker, warning you to question everything, your identity, your memories, even your very sense of control. The self is a construct, they say, a fragile story spun to mask the chaos beneath. What you believe you remember is a lie, but the lie is safer than the truth. You feel yourself pulled deeper into this web, a thread in a tapestry that twists and folds upon itself endlessly. The boundaries between you and the watchers blur, the line between your waking life and the cryptic signals shivering through the air thins to a razor's edge. Every question answered births two more. Every piece of evidence folds back on itself until certainty becomes impossible. But through the noise, the weight of that final message presses down. You were right, all along. And whatever force is pulling the strings, unseen but omnipresent, it's not finished with you yet. The screen flickers, the symbols flash again, and you realize the story you thought you were watching was never just a story. It was a summons, an invitation, and you are already inside. There is a moment sharp and sudden when the weight of everything you've uncovered presses down on your chest like a cold stone, not because of what happened, but because of what it means. The mystery, once tangled in timelines, vanished figures, and fractured memories, crystallizes into something painfully simple and terrifyingly profound. It's not about who disappeared on Mars, or what the government tried to erase, or even the watchers lurking in the spaces between. It's about why this all unfolded, what it reveals about the fragility of being human, about the darkness we carry within, and the desperate need to be seen, to be remembered, to be understood. You stand on the edge of a precipice, the raw truth shimmering just beyond your grasp, promising either annihilation or salvation. This truth could shatter everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world, or it could finally set you free from the looping nightmare that's haunted your every breath. And in this unbearable silence, you face a choice. To embrace the darkness behind the veil, to dive into the abyss of your own mind and confront the shadows you've long denied, or to turn away, clutching your fractured reality like a lifeline, knowing that ignorance, though poisonous, may be the only way to survive. The confession comes unbidden, searing and vulnerable, as the fractures in your memory bleed open. You weren't just a witness or a victim. You were the key, the one whose fear and hope fed the invisible force that's been watching, waiting, shaping everything. Your own doubts, your own longing, your own fragile humanity are woven into the pattern of this cosmic experiment, this cycle of disappearance and return. It's a reflection of your own soul's darkest corners, the loneliness, the terror, the desperate need to find meaning in chaos. And yet, as this realization dawns, it feels less like an ending and more like waking up from a dream you never knew you were living. The slow, disorienting return to a world that feels both familiar and utterly alien. The edges of your reality blur, the lines between self and other dissolve, and you understand that what you're confronting is not just a story about Mars or lost explorers. It's the raw, trembling heartbeat of what it means to be human. Endlessly searching, endlessly breaking, endlessly hoping. The screen fades, but the silence stretches long, thick with questions that have no answers. Then, as the last flicker dims, a voice, soft, distant, almost a whisper, closes the story. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.